Nate Oats has the Crimson Tide rolling in the portal. Can anybody in the SEC keep up?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, what's up? Welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, the only daily national college hoop show out there. We're your hosts. This lovely gentleman over here to my side is Mr. Andy Patton. I'm Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. Oh yes, even in the off season. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch. A reminder that you can get every single episode ad-free on Amazon Music. We want to extend a special shout out to all you everydayers out there, as well as all the members of the Locked On College Basketball Discord community. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Oh, game off. Hang on. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis to taunt your friends. So download Monopoly Go right now, free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Andy, coming up on the show today, no, folks, you are not mixed up. This is college basketball, but it's going to feel like it's college football day because we're starting with some Alabama chatter. Then we're going to move to Ohio State, I'm telling you. But then we take a hard left turn right back into college basketball because we're going to hit a Gonzaga transfer portal commitment and several other things in the transfer portal and et cetera in a Monday six-pack for you. So, Andy, right out of the gate here, we're eventually going to get to asking the question, is Alabama going to be the class of the SEC in 24-25? So just put a pin in that. But we ask that question now because Nate Oats has landed Cliff Omoruyi, the Rutgers transfer, the big man, the center, steals him over North Carolina, along with Georgetown and Kansas State as well. But Andy, what world are we living in where Alabama is able to win a transfer recruiting battle over the likes of a North Carolina?
Yeah, it's insane to see this happen. I think everybody kind of had North Carolina penciled in as like, this seems like the likely fit. They need to replace Armando Bacot. They struck out on Jonas Adu. Like, this is, they're going to put their best foot forward here. This is the guy they need to land. And it didn't feel like, I don't want to say that it's like a luxury for Alabama. They needed some front court presence. They needed some rim protection. It was something they didn't have last year. And obviously since Charles Bediako has left, but like, it definitely is surprising to see Alabama outbid North. We don't know the finances necessarily, but basically be able
I've
to
heard conflicting reports on the numbers.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of conflicting reports on NIL numbers. That's just kind of part of the era that we're in right now. But Alabama straight up won a recruiting battle over North Carolina on the basketball court. Not a football situation, basketball court. And they also won a pretty important game against North Carolina last year and that to get to the Final Four. So it's been I'm sure those North Carolina fans are not feeling too great about Nate Oats and the Crimson Tide right now, but certainly the North Carolina side of this conversation is a big element of it because they're running out of options to replace Bacot in that front court. But when you look at this from an Alabama perspective, I mean, this is a really nice piece that they needed in that front court. They got Grant Nelson coming back, but that's not really the role that he's best at filling. I think it was easy to watch Alabama last year and think, hey, if they could pair Grant Nelson with like a low post, back to the basket, shot blocking center, that might allow Nelson to kind of be a bit freer and do a few more things. And I think that's kind of the plan that Nate Oats and the staff have identified here. And I think it's really going to work out. And you look at, he's coming into a class that already includes Aiden Holloway coming over from Auburn and Chris Youngblood coming from South Florida and Houston Millett from Pepperdine. And obviously Holloway and Millett are both point guards and Youngblood's a 3. So this is their biggest like front court big guy addition. And I think he kind of fills that Nick Pringle role for this team. And I'm really excited to see what this looks like. And when you kind of look at all the pieces that Alabama has with the newcomers coming in, with I've struggled to say his name, Omoruyi coming in as well, and the freshman.
Yeah.
Say it again.
Omoruyi. That's how I always remember it.
Omoruyi. That's actually really easy. I can do that. So with him, with the three transfers, with the incoming freshman class that includes Darian Reed, who's number 15 in the class, Aiden Sherrell's 30th, LeBaron Fillon is 32nd, Nas Cunningham 43rd. That's all at 24/7 Sports. 4 top 50 prospects coming in. A really good transfer portal class of guards coming in already. Now you add in Omoruyi, and I'm really excited about what Nate Oats and the Crimson Tide are building right now.
Yeah, and we haven't even talked about Jaron Stevenson yet, who, had some moments in the NCAA tournament and throughout the season. But similar to Grant Nelson, he's not the role of Omoruyi. He's more like he's a really big, really skilled and talented player, but doesn't do what Cliff Omoruyi does. For me, this was the missing piece for Alabama, just like what you said about North Carolina, Andy. This is a very critical piece. Yes, a luxury in some regards, but it makes them, to me, as I look around the SEC, Andy, this to me is my preseason favorite as of Cinco de Mayo, right? And who knows what else could happen as we go throughout the summer and rosters change and evolve. But it ain't Tennessee, it ain't Kentucky, it ain't Arkansas. Right now, for me, Andy, it's the Alabama Crimson Tide.
Is that with Mark Sears? Or is that even if Mark Sears decides to stay in the NBA draft process? Because that's, to me, the biggest hinge remaining with this Crimson Tide team.
That's the question. So the Mark Sears decision of whether to stay in the draft or come back, Andy, off the top of my head, I can't think of another decision in America that will impact a team more dramatically based on whatever he does.
Yeah.
For me, Alabama without Mark Sears can still be top 10, 15. With Mark Sears back, they're top 5 and arguably in the conversation with Kansas right at the top of the heap. Can you get there on that?
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it seems to me like Oates has hedged his bets a little bit. Like Houston Millett coming from Pepperdine, they added him while they were still in the NCAA tournament. And he's a very talented guard. He can play the one. He can also play kind of off the ball. And so you add somebody like that. You add somebody like Aiden Holloway, who's more of a developmental prospect. I mean, he just flat out wasn't that good last year for Auburn, but there's obviously a lot of potential. There's 3 years remaining. So what I like about those two additions, and of course the freshman coming in as well, is that Mark Sears, they're very far from pushing Mark Sears out. But they're also prepared if he does leave. Roster management is really delicate in the modern era. You don't want to make additions that make players feel like they need to leave or that they're being pushed out, but you also don't want to be caught holding the bag where somebody does leave and you don't have a plan in place. And you see teams sometimes successfully, sometimes not so successfully trying to navigate this, where they're trying to figure out, how do I get pieces in that aren't going to threaten the players I currently have, but are also going to, be able to step up if I need them to. And I think that Nate Oats has done a really good job of that, because if Houston Millett's your third or fourth guard, this team is amazing. If Houston Millett's your second guard, they're still pretty good because he's still pretty good. And if you need to rely on Aiden Holloway a little bit more, you push him and you try to get him to have a sophomore leap, to take that jump, to change the scenery, changes things for him. And if Sears comes back and you don't need him and he develops more behind the scenes and plays a smaller role and then has a bigger blossom as a junior, great. They're kind of set up to go either direction. And that is really hard to do in modern college basketball. Having said all of that, yes, if Mark Sears does not come back, this is still a good team, but they're not top 5 right now. Maybe they make more additions. Maybe they get there. Maybe some other teams, lose some guys and it changes. Who knows? But right now they're probably 10-ish without Mark Sears. But with Mark Sears, the only team that off the top of my head that I think I would convincingly have ahead of Alabama is Kansas. And at that point, there's a real chance the Crimson Tide are second or at least in that top 5 conversation.
And just bringing it back around to Omoruyi one more time, Andy, I know there are going to be people out there saying, why are we so excited about a dude from Rutgers? Well, folks, let me remind you that last summer, UConn got a dude from Rutgers named Cam Spencer that just became one of the names of this entire college basketball season, doing absolute work for the national champs. And so, folks, you just got to remember, it really is all about skill set and fit and complementary pieces. And that's exactly what Omoruyi is for this roster. This is a dude that last year averaged 10.4 points 8.3 boards and 2.9 blocks in just 27 minutes a game, right? And for a team that's going to be much better than Rutgers, whether it's numbers or efficiency or whatever, the fit to me is great for Nate Oats. This is an athletic, big, running dude. What he's not is the Nate Oats, I'm going to step out and trigger from three all day long.
Yeah.
It's not going to be that. But they've got plenty of that, Andy. If he can just live around the rim, dunk everything in sight, that'll be great.
Well, Isaac, we joked about this being a college football themed show, talking about Alabama and Ohio State. But of course, we spent a lot of time talking about North Carolina. And now we're going to talk a little bit about Duke, because another one of Duke's transfers is off the board. We're going to talk about Sean Stewart and what his commitment might mean for Jake Diebler and his first year with the Ohio State Buckeyes. All that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you that today's episode of Locked On College Basketball is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. Folks, when you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. And that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster, and they do it for free. LinkedIn is not just another job board. They help hire professionals that you cannot find anywhere else, even those who are not actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users do not visit any other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, folks, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. So hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is also constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process easier and quicker. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Isaac talked Alabama and the big addition in the front court for them. Now we're going to talk about another front court addition for another traditionally football powerhouse school at Ohio State. Now, the player we're talking about here is Sean Stewart, who definitely doesn't have quite the same pedigree, but is a guy who has a lot of potential upside. For those of you who are unfamiliar, Sean Stewart, 6'8" power forward, 3 years of eligibility, was a McDonald's All-American out of high school, heavily recruited by Jake Diebler when he was the associate head coach at Ohio State, coaching under Chris Holtmann. Of course, now he is the head coach, and he manages to find a way to get Stewart to Columbus after he initially committed to join the Duke Blue Devils as a freshman. And we saw signs, Isaac, from Sean Stewart that indicated that he can be the type of high-level athletic energy big that we kind of expected him to be. But he didn't show that throughout most of the season for Duke simply because he was buried on the bench. That Duke team had a lot of guys in front of him. Kyle Filipowski, of course, returned for his sophomore year. They had Ryan Young in the mix. They also had Mark Mitchell in the mix as well, kind of all in that 4-5 kind of hybrid positioning. And it just didn't lead to a lot of consistent playing time for Sean Stewart. Now he goes to Ohio State, where as of right now, there's not a whole lot of players in front of him in the front court. In fact, the only other real obvious front court player on the roster is another McDonald's All-American from the same class in Aaron Bradshaw, who spent last year at Kentucky, but has now transferred to Ohio State. So, Isaac, if on November 6th, 7th, whatever the first day of the season ends up being, if Ohio State is starting both Aaron Bradshaw and Sean Stewart, it feels to me like the range of outcomes for how that's going to go is about as widespread as it can possibly be. What are your thoughts on that tantalizing, but also very inexperienced front court that could be who ends up starting for Ohio State this season?
Well, Andy, you just missed a golden opportunity to say as widespread as Aaron Bradshaw's wingspan. So
I was like 7'9", something like that.
Really disappointed in your effort there. What's funny is, as you were talking, I looked back at the rosters from the 23 McDag game, and they were actually on the same team. I had forgotten that together. So reunited now in Columbus, Ohio. Yeah, Andy, it's such an interesting point because, look, these two dudes are both uber talented in Aaron Bradshaw and in Sean Stewart. With Bradshaw, I mean, there were the injuries early last year. I think that severely stunted his ability for Kentucky. And they had those 3 7-footers, really, literally none of whom were available out of the gate. Big Z, because he was ineligible. You got Onyensa was hurt as well as Bradshaw. And so Trey Mitchell was like the starting 5 at that point. But so, like, in that regard, Andy, it's just hard to know, like, all right, Aaron Bradshaw, healthy offseason, heading into his sophomore year where a lot of guys take a massive leap anyway. What's that going to look like? Sean Stewart, as you said, down the stretch of the season, here and there started to show some sparks and some shines. And it's like, oh, is he primed for a breakout? But then he heads out of Durham. And so I think all of that, it's the tantalizing talent, but the unproven in any sort of consistent ongoing way. That gives me a lot of pause if I'm a Buckeyes fan, but it gives me a lot of hope that's maybe unfounded. And that's the hard thing of this, because also as you look at it, Andy, we've got these other three transfers, Michi Johnson from South Carolina, who I really like, shooting guard, and Bradshaw we've been talking about. And then Micah Parrish coming over from San Diego State, a guy that just played for the national championship a couple years ago, small forward. And Andy, when you look at it, Bruce Thornton's back as well. Last year, 15.7 points a game, 3.7 rebounds, 4.8 assists, just over one turnover game. Averaged over a steal a game, 85% from the free throw line, 33% from three. Thornton can run the offense, and the way these four incoming transfers work out, that could be your starting lineup, Andy. That front court you just mentioned with Stewart and Bradshaw, but then Thornton running the show, Michi Johnson on the wing, or, shooting guard off to his side, and Micah Parrish on the other side as the wing. That it's again a tantalizing, even potential starting five, but once again, how do those five pieces coming from literally five different schools all fit together?
Yeah, and I think I like the idea of mixing and matching, having some young guys with upside, some veteran guys, some transfers, some developmental pieces within your system. And in theory, that's kind of what Ohio State has here. You have a returning guy in Bruce Thornton who's been in the program for 2 years. I think if you're going to pick a position where you want your experience and familiarity with the system, you're going to probably pick it at point guard. So that's good, check. They have that going for them. You have a veteran guy who's got a ton of college basketball experience and national championship experience in Micah Parrish. You have a veteran guy in Michi Johnson as well. I don't love that both of your front court players are super inexperienced. I think that's a bit, I'd rather it be a bit more balanced roster wise. I think if I was Diebler right now, one of the biggest things I'd be looking for is trying to get some kind of veteran big, ideally a guy who's capable of starting, so that if Sean Stewart or Aaron Bradshaw is not ready to step into that role, you have somebody who can. But, starting centers, as North Carolina fans are finding out right now, not exactly easy players to find in the transfer portal. Right. And I suspect that Diebler and Ohio State have cashed in a lot of their money to land these young guns. So we'll see kind of how that shakes out for them. But the upside with Bradshaw and Stewart, if they do mesh together well, and I think like from a what they bring to the table, just a skill set perspective, I think it works. Bradshaw's a decent shot blocker. Stewart, not as much. That's not exactly his area. Bradshaw can also step out where Stewart didn't really do that, but Stewart's a good low post scorer. Like, I think there are ways that it could work potentially, but it's risky. It's certainly risky. And if you're Ohio State, I mean, last year just did not go well until the very end of the season. So you're kind of playing with house money a little bit. You can afford to take some chances and see how this thing shakes out. Like, Diebler's not going to get canned if this first year doesn't go very well. So I think that you're feeling fairly confident. But again, if this works out, Ohio State's a top 5 team in the Big Ten. I'm saying off the top of my head, but
I thought you were going to say nationally.
No. Top 5 in the Big Ten. And even then, that's a pretty high end result for them, because the Big Ten just added like 40 more schools coming in as well. But like, I think they have the potential to be very good next year and be a team that's like potentially in that conversation as a ranked team and getting a decent seed in March. That's probably the top end potential for them, but that's predicated on not just one of these guys breaking out, but both of them. And I'm not sure I'm willing to take that risk without getting some more insurance kind of on the back end.
Yeah. And I think that's right. If I were ranking everyone right now, if I were doing a way too early, I'd probably have this team low teens, early 20s. Maybe I think I would rank them based on that potential. And I'm saying that without looking at everybody right now, but it from a talent standpoint, it feels like that type of level of where I'd have them. Yeah. Would you rank them, do you think, just on where that's at right now, or no?
I think they'd be at the bottom of my rankings right now. I think they'd be in that conversation. Again, they got a decent freshman class coming in. Junie Mobley is a guy that a lot of people really like, top 50 prospect, kind of a potential backup to Thornton if he's ready right away, if not more of a developmental piece. But
no relation to Evan, by the way. I looked it up.
No relation to Evan Mobley or Katino Mobley, I assume, although maybe he is related to Katino Mobley. Who knows? Anyway, shout it out to the early 2000s Houston Rockets teams right there. No, I think this is probably a borderline top 25 team right now, but I think the depth is a concern. And again, one more front court addition would make me feel a lot more comfortable about what this team's going to look like next year.
Yeah. Well, Andy, we got teams all over the nation adding stuff. And in fact, just on Sunday, an hour or so before we started recording, Gonzaga won the battle for Khalif. Does it give them a championship caliber roster? Did they already have one? We'll tell you coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about Monopoly Go. All right, game off. Hang on. We got to pause right here to talk more about Monopoly Go. And I know what you're saying. Look, Shade, flag on the play. Andy, stop this guy from talking about Monopoly again. But look, there's just so much good stuff in this game. We got to keep going because in Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends. For timed tournaments, I'm virtually putting my arm around Andy to team up with him, where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so many of those to get, like unique stickers that you can trade back and forth with your friends to complete albums for big prizes. Or cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. Hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton of these include their own unique mini games like digging for treasures. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover at Monopoly Go. So get off the bench, go download it now for free at Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Andy, it is a Monday six-pack. We're looking at all sorts of player movement, a couple individuals, a couple school-related ones. And so why don't you kick us off with that Gonzaga-related information that happened just about an hour or two ago as we record?
Yes, yeah. Khalif Battle from Arkansas commits to Gonzaga. He was top three of Gonzaga, Villanova, and Kansas State. He came to Spokane over the weekend, left with that commitment for Mark Few and the Bulldogs. Spent 1 year at Butler, 3 years at Temple, and then spent last year at Arkansas. Had some injury issues at Temple, which allows him to have now a sixth year of college basketball eligibility. He averaged about 15 points per game last year for the Hogs, but the main story was in the final 7 games of the season for Arkansas. Khalif Battle averaged 29.5 points per game. He hung 42 on Missouri. He hung 36 on Vanderbilt, and he hung 34 on Kentucky at Rupp Arena. When you let this young man get going, he gets going. He's going to fill a third guard role for Gonzaga behind starting point guard Ryan Nembhard and starting shooting guard Nolan Hickman. You may be thinking, why would Battle go to a school where he's going to not start? He's played 101 college basketball games. He's only started 32 of them. He is comfortable in that microwave scoring third guard role coming off the bench. For Gonzaga, he fills out a 9-man rotation that, frankly, outside of maybe Kansas, maybe now Alabama, certainly if they get Sears back, I would put Gonzaga's 9-man rotation up there against just about everybody's in college basketball. And a big part of that is this new addition of Khalif Battle.
Clear that he wants to go win a championship. This dude, as you said, microwave, crazy efficient in the minutes he does get. Andy, let's go to the ACC where Clemson got some bummer news, but understandable news. PJ Hall is off to the NBA draft where he suggests that he definitely wants to stay in. Last year, averaged 18.3 points, 6.4 boards, 1.4 blocks, 1.4 assists, and I think about 7 fouls a game, Andy, if we're being honest. Poor PJ just can't stay out of foul trouble ever. But Andy, I know you and I were both really hopeful for Clemson next year. If PJ Hall stayed, they get back Ian Shefflin. Their front court would have been intact. Chase Hunter is back as well. Joe Girard's off and gone, but still, that threesome, man, I think it would have been great for Brad Brownell. Unfortunately, their big dude is off and gone, so they'll have to reset a little bit. Interesting to see what Clemson does now.
Switching from Clemson to Oregon. Who says it's still a basketball show? Now it looks looking a little bit more like a football school.
But a Big Ten show.
Yeah, right. Yes, Oregon, of course, notorious Big Ten member. They made a trio of really fantastic transfer portal additions for Dana Altman and the Ducks, headlined by TJ Bamba coming back over to the West Coast, started his career at Washington State, transferred to Villanova last year. And it just, like so many things at Villanova in the last couple of years, just didn't go all that well for him out there. He comes back to the West Coast, going to join the Oregon Ducks. Along with him is Raheem Moss, transfer from Toledo, and then Brandon Angel coming over from Stanford. 3 big-time additions for Dana Altman's team. They also get back KJ Evans, who many thought might declare for the NBA draft. They get back Jackson Shellstad, their star point guard from last year. They also get back Mookie Cook, who missed most of last year with injuries, but was a top 25 regarded prospect in that class. So 3 very, very dynamic sophomores returning alongside these 3 transfers. Things are looking pretty good in Eugene, Oregon right now. We're talking about teams in the bottom half of that top 25. If Ohio State's in that conversation, you can bet that Oregon's going to be in that conversation as well.
Andy, some great news for Dayton. They landed Posh Alexander coming over from Butler. He had played 3 years at St. John's, played at Butler last year, where he averaged 11.3 points, 4.9 assists, 4.6 boards. Literally every year of college, Andy, this dude has averaged over 2 steals a game. Really impressive stuff there. Not much of a 3-point shooter, so he can't help with being a Kobe Bryant replacement, which Dayton is in need of. And sometimes, as Trilly Donovan is fond of saying, that we've kind of started using here as well, sometimes the best gets are the ones you already have or that are already in your house or already on your team. I need to just get that in my head. But Nate Santos withdraws from the transfer portal and is coming back. He's flying back, if you'll allow me that, to Dayton for his final season of college basketball. 2 years at Pitt, and then was at Dayton last year. 11.7 points a game, 6.3 boards, 1.5 assists, but 41.8% from 3, Andy, on 3.7 attempts per game. And as we said, much needed with Kobe Bryant off to Kentucky. And so good stuff here for the Flyers.
Isaac, with apologies to Jalen Warley, who's committing to Virginia from Florida State, that was going to be number 5 here on our 6-pack. I just saw on Twitter that Norchad Omier from Miami has committed to join Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears. And we're going to have a larger conversation about Norchad Omier going to Baylor on a future episode, since we don't have time to do so right now. But wow, we knew that Baylor needed a replacement for Jonas Adu, or they wanted to get Jonas Adu, were unable to. Now they get Norchad Omier coming in alongside Jeremy Roach, 2 huge time additions from the ACC, joining Scott Drew and the Baylor Bears. What a massive get for this team when you factor in that tremendous recruiting class headlined by VJ Edgecombe. Wow. Baylor's going to be in that conversation as a top 5 team next year, and they absolutely should. I'm really excited to see what Omier and Roach look like paired together in that offense for the Bears.
Seems like we're going to have to talk to Cam Stewart on Tuesday's show, Andy, the great host of Locked On Baylor, and see what he's got in store. They missed out on Jonas Adu. Great stuff. I think they will be very pleased with only one of 2 people who has averaged a double-double each of the last 2 years in the ACC, along with Armando Bacot. Andy, we wrap up our 6-pack with some sad news for Nebraska. This came out last Thursday, but we didn't get to it on Friday's show. Rink Mast is going to miss the upcoming season with surgery on his left knee. He does plan to return in 25-26 season, Andy, and that means that Khalif Battle is not the longest tenured college basketball player we've talked about in this segment, because for Mast, that would be his 7th year of college. He had another red shirt previously, plus COVID eligibility. It's a whole thing. And by the way, when people say this is the last year of COVID eligibility, right? Yes, except for we're going to have a couple things like this where there's going to be like COVID-ish guys back for one more season. Anyway, last year, 12.3 points, 7.5 boards, 3 assists. Andy, 84% from the free throw line, 34.4% from 3. Had 6 double-doubles for Nebraska last year. Andy, it doesn't seem like a ton, but that's the most by a Cornhusker since the 07-08 season. Pretty bonkers there. So the Nebraska is able to add Wisconsin's Braxton Mia as replacement, so hopefully he can step in there. Always, we talk about it a lot anytime a guy goes down injured. Hate to see this, Andy. Best to Mast in his recovery.
It's going to wrap it up for us today here on the Locked On College Basketball Podcast. Very glad we got slightly delayed in recording today so we could catch that Norchad Omier news. We're, of course, like I said, going to talk about.
He likes green, Andy. He likes green.
He must be the case. He loves wearing green. Very excited about that addition for the Bears. We'll talk more about that. And we'll continue to keep you updated on any other transfer additions, any more NBA draft players who are opting out of the draft, coming back to school. Of course, we're getting into the combine and various other draft-related things, which we'll keep you up to date with as well here on Locked On College Basketball. Thanks again for making the show your first listen or your first watch of the day. Join us on our Discord channel if you have not done so yet. Apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wildcats. And until tomorrow, peace.